Hi everyone, I'm CaliKim. Welcome to my garden. Today I'm going to show you how to have a non-stop harvest of beans all summer long. Now if you're a beginner, beans are one of the very easiest crops you can plant and they love the summer weather, but they're not a one and done crop. With a few strategies I'm going to show you today, you're going to be able to harvest them all summer and have plenty of fresh, delicious beans straight from your own organic garden grocery store. The first strategy I like to use to have non-stop beans all summer is to plant beans of different types, both pole and runner beans and bush beans. Now one of my very favorite varieties is right here. It's a runner bean, scarlet runner beans. These are an absolutely gorgeous bean and super prolific. The benefit of pole and runner beans is they produce a ton over a longer period of time. These scarlet runner beans are just loaded down with beans from top to bottom of this plant, and they produce very early. Not only that, they have absolutely gorgeous red flowers which really bring in the pollinators. The bees and the hummingbirds absolutely love these flowers. But they definitely do need some support. So there's several different ways that you can support polar runner beans. This wooden tower is a perfect choice. They can reach 10 to 15 feet tall. When your polar runner beans reach the top of the trellis, to avoid really long tangled vines, what you can do is just top them off. And what this does, it opens up the airflow and also encourages more lateral branching and side shoots, which will help you produce more beans. Now just to show you how long and crazy and prolific this vine is, it's actually growing up into my A-frame arch. Now I don't want too many beans growing on this arch because I've got cucumbers growing. So what I'm going to do is go around to the other side and snip off this vine, which will encourage more bean production on the lower vines. So we give it a nice little snip, helps control the size. Now look at everything I removed. It's not only creating more airflow for the plants underneath, won't shade out the lower leaves or the cucumbers, but it'll also help my bean plant produce more by sending all the energy into bean production rather than into all these extra leaves. Now you do need a good amount of space to grow pole or runner beans. The tower trellis works great. A couple of other ways I really like to trellis them is on a cattle panel. They pop up very easily when they're direct seated right in the ground and just start to grow almost effortlessly up the panel. I've attached the first little stem here with a little clip, and then every few days I come out and just wind up the little trailing branches that will naturally start to climb as it grows. And believe me, they will grow fast and create a nice little kind of fence archway here of beans. If you'd like to help us out, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Thanks. I also love to trellis my polar runner beans up a fence. They make a really nice edible landscape. So the scarlet runner beans again make a gorgeous green backdrop here. Got little tiny beans coming on. They're absolutely beautiful and so tasty. So it's kind of fun just to walk down my stairs. They're all attached here to this ladder mesh trellis and pick a couple of beans for our dinner that evening. Now you can see here they're already growing up above the fence because I want this whole area to fill in. What I do every couple of days is just kind of wind them throughout this lattice trellis. And we've just attached the lattice trellis to the fence. It makes it really easy. It's very inexpensive. So I just kind of wind it through here. And that way the beans will start to grow laterally and fill in the space. Some of my favorite pole and runner bean varieties are, I mentioned the scarlet runner bean. It's in my bean seed collection. And also the rattlesnake bean, which is just starting to climb up this lattice trellis. It's a beautiful green bean with purple speckles on it. It's absolutely delicious in salads. One of the wonderful things about pole and runner beans is they can be used to really enhance the visual appeal and the beauty of your garden. So go for it. This is one of my very favorite ways to grow them, is here on this nice sturdy arch. Makes a beautiful entrance into the hill garden. I'll link up to where I got this trellis. It's very nice and sturdy, but polar runner beans really don't need a super sturdy trellis, but it's more about the beauty of it for these scarlet runners right here. The hummingbirds love them and we really enjoy watching them while we're sitting on the deck in the evening. And here comes a pollinator to visit me as I'm filming. Oh my goodness, absolutely beautiful. That is a huge bumblebee. Are you getting that one, Jerry?
Yes.
You can see how much they absolutely love the flowers. He isn't even afraid of me either. Great pollination like this, I'll soon have tons and tons of beans on this arch. This is just amazing. I'll go to another flower. He's not gonna hurt you, he's not gonna hurt you, stand still. Another one of my favorite trellises is the fence slat poultry wire trellis, and I show you how to build this in my book on raised bed gardening. The scarlet runner beans are just climbing up, make such a beautiful backdrop to this garden bed, and will be producing some non-stop harvest for me all summer. Now, don't be afraid though to trim out some of the lower branches of your pole or runner beans, because I've got tomatoes planted in here, and I don't want them growing out and over the sides and shading out my tomatoes. They grow very, very quickly and will soon grow back, and you can start to train the vines upward, and will actually produce some more when you trim off some of the lower leaves here to manage the size and send all its energy into additional bean production. So much fun to have these fresh, delicious beans right in your own garden grocery store. You really can't beat it. So look how much this is clearing it up, giving more airflow, which also helps reduce disease. By planting your pole and runner beans on a variety of trellises so they grow up and not out, you can really maximize your harvest and have beans all summer. Now, one of my very, very favorite ways to trellis beans is up a natural trellis like a sunflower stalk. And here I'm gonna just pop in some of my rattlesnake beans at the bottom of the sunflower stalk. So the sunflower stalk serves as dual purpose, brings in the pollinators, provides beauty to your garden, and also serves as a trellis for your beans. Bean seeds are just so beautiful. Look at these speckled rattlesnake bean seeds. I just absolutely love them. So I'm just gonna pop in a couple of little bean seeds, put them about 1 inch or so deep right here into the soil. Add a little bit more soil here, and the weather now is about 70 or 80 degrees. It's perfect for beans. As they pop up and start to grow, they'll just naturally start to climb up the trellis, maybe with a little bit of help from you, provide a nice, beautiful presentation here in the garden. While bush beans take up a good amount of space, they do produce a lot over a long period of time. However, I also like to plant bush beans. You may not get quite as much production out of them, but they fit in a smaller space. You can grow them in a container or a raised bed, great for patios or balconies, and they produce a lot all at once within about 6 to 8 weeks from planting the seed. So here I've got some beautiful bush beans growing. I love to grow different varieties of bush beans. We have the Jackson, we have the Royal Red Burgundy, and I believe there might even be some edamame beans popping up in here, which is a really fun and delicious variety to grow as well. Now, the great thing about bush beans is you plant the seeds, they pop up very, very quickly. Here I've got one I planted probably just a week ago, and I've got a few of the Jackson beans here that are ready to harvest. So you just snap them off and take them into the house and cook them up. Now, bush beans are very easy to plant in a container. Here I've got a 10-gallon smart pot here filled with my DIY potting mix, which is made up of coco coir, compost, vermiculite, and some worm castings. And I'm going to plant some dwarf Taylor bush beans for my bean seed collection. This is one of my very favorite varieties. It's so beautiful. It's a lighter colored, kind of purple speckled bean. And the great thing about bush beans is there's so many different varieties you can plant. You can grow purple ones, yellow ones, green ones. There's just all kinds of different beans you can grow, speckled ones. They're absolutely beautiful and make a beautiful visual appeal for the garden. So I'm just kind of poking the seeds down in here about 1 inch or so, covering up with soil. Super quick to plant. They pop up quickly, and you can harvest bush beans within about 6 to 8 weeks. That's one of the most amazing things about growing them, is from seed to harvest very, very quickly. Now, bush beans, you don't have to trellis them, but I actually prefer to provide them with a little bit of a light trellis, like this bamboo arch pole, because once they grow a ton of beans, and they do, they tend to kind of flop over. So this gives them a nice little support, and here I've kind of wound some twine around the arch just to give them additional support as they grow. But you can use a very simple stake, or if you don't want to use a lightweight trellis or a stake, let me show you a really easy way to support your bean plants in a container or in a raised bed. Here I've got several plants in a 10-gallon CaliKim Smart Pot, and they don't have any kind of support right now. There's a sunflower in here, but it's climbing up my support stick here that I have. So what you can do is just take a little bit of extra soil and just kind of prop it up around the stem of the bean plant, just to give it that extra support as it grows. That way it'll save it from flopping over onto the ground. Strategy number 2 for a non-stop harvest all summer is to stagger my plantings every 3 to 4 weeks. Now what this does is it gives you beans that are at various stages of growth, so you never run out of organic beans from your garden grocery store. So what I have here are beans that are flowering and fruiting. I just picked a couple of beans from this little shorty here, and then I just planted some bean seeds that will be popping up within a week or so and be ready to harvest in 6 to 8 weeks. And then a couple of weeks ago, I planted some bean seeds in this little shorty that are just popping up, and again, will be ready to harvest in about 6 to 8 weeks. So this way, once this crop is done, I'll have other beans to take their place. Staggering your plantings is called succession planting. Another way you can do this is, come on back over to the red table and I'll show you, is by planting beans in 6-packs that you can pop in your garden beds when they're done producing. So I've got a couple 6-packs over here, and you can, if it's warm where you live, you can just grow them right outside on a little table or on your deck or patio. And you just start your seeds outside the same way you would indoors, but you don't have to use grow lights. So it saves you some time, it saves you hardening off. And these are a really beautiful slenderette bush bean. They're a thin yellow bean. So I'm going to pop those right in here in this cow pot. Now beans don't always take well to having their roots disturbed, so cow pots are a really great way to start them, because that way you can just pop the cow pot and all right into your garden bed as soon as your previous crop is done producing. The 6-packs work really well also. The Royal Burgundy bush beans are one of my absolute favorite beans. They're delicious, they're tender, and they're absolutely a beautiful purple color. So it really is fun to grow the rainbow when you plant your beans. Just pop a couple of seeds in each 6-pack. And that way you're thinking ahead just a little bit of planning, and you're gonna have lots of beans this summer, all summer long. And you can grab my bean seed collection over on my website, CaliKimGardenandHome.com. I also like to succession plant my runner beans. A good strategy for runner beans is use them to hide something that you don't necessarily want to look at. Now I'm not wild about this post here for our hose, so I'm just going to pop in a scarlet runner bean seed. And by the way, look at these seeds. Are they not the most gorgeous thing you've ever seen? Absolutely love them. So because they require very little care, very little prep for planting, I'm just going to pop one here at the base of this post here. Just push it into the ground. There we go. Cover it up with some of the mud right here. And before you know it, this will pop up, and I can kind of wind it around this pole, this post, and then cut it off when it reaches the top to increase the visual appeal of this area here that I don't love that much. Succession planting is a great way to get non-stop harvests. I've got a whole succession planting chart and a section on that in my book on raised bed gardening. Next strategy for non-stop harvest is, believe it or not, watering. Now it might seem very basic, but beans do need to be kept well watered because they have very shallow roots. And if they dry out, they're just not going to be as productive, or they can get stunted and then the leaves start to yellow and they won't be near as productive as you want them to be. So you give them a nice little soaking here in this container until the water runs out the bottom. And this is a 10-gallon container, but you can also grow beans in a 5-gallon container. Now, they don't need a lot of feeding. Generally what I do is I feed them at the beginning of the growing season, amend the soil really well with compost and a good organic fertilizer, and then maybe give them a nice little boost right when they start to flower and fruit with a very gentle fertilizer. Nothing high nitrogen at this point, because you don't want them to produce a lot of leaves, you want them to produce beans. So what I always like to use is the vermisterat worm castings or Vitality. It's nice and gentle, and it really does help increase the flowering and fruiting of the vegetables. Now we see a lot more production when I'm using that about once a month or so in my containers throughout the growing season. That way they start to produce. You can see these beans are starting to flower and little teeny tiny beans are starting to come on here. Along with watering comes mulching. Now mulching is super important because it helps protect the roots of the plants when it gets really hot and also helps decrease water evaporation. Oh, I've been looking for this pencil. That's where it went. So I like to put an inch or two of shredded leaf mulch around the base of the plants to protect them in the heat, and if you get a cold snap, it'll protect the roots from getting too cold so the beans keep on producing. But the biggest reason in the summer heat is to help with the water evaporation, especially in containers. It means you have to water less often and keeps your beans rolling along even through the summer heat. Last strategy for non-stop bean production all summer long is really the magic bullet. Any guesses? If you said harvesting, you're right. Because the more you harvest beans, the more they produce. It really does work like magic. Now for pole and runner beans, especially these runner beans here, they're a little bit flatter. So you want to harvest them before the pods start to bulge, or they tend to get tough and not much good for eating themselves. So let me show you what I mean here. There's some where the pods are really bulging, like this one here. Now this would be good to hang on to and save for dried beans or beans that you could put in soups over the winter time. These ones that are right over here are young and tender, and they're gonna be nice and delicious to have with our dinner tonight. So I'm gonna pick a few of these. These could actually probably go for a few more days. But the thing is, you miss a day of beans and you're gonna have some that are overgrown. So you really do need to check your plants every day. So there's some up here that are still a little bit on the small side, but I definitely rather have smaller than bigger as far as eating goes. And it really is important to check under the leaves and even climb up to the top of your trellis to harvest, because once you miss the beans and they're really big like this one here, it actually sends a signal to the plant to stop producing beans and start producing seeds, because the goal of every plant is to reproduce. So you want to try not to let them get this big. But these scarlet runner beans are absolutely gorgeous. And what I like to do is even just open up the pods and admire how absolutely beautiful these beans are. At the end of the season, you can let these beans dry right on the plant and then save them to replant next year. Look at those beautiful pink beans. Aren't they gorgeous? So we're going to grab these overly ripe beans off the plant here, and you can even throw these in your compost pile or get them to your chickens, or just let them dry out and then save the beans to cook for refried beans or rehydrate and have on your salads. Now this plant already has tons and tons of beans on it. There's a lot more around this other side. So you can see how incredibly productive these runner beans are. It's just absolutely loaded down. Even the parts of the plant that don't get a ton of sun just have a ton of beans on them. Now, this one really is the ideal size for eating. And these are probably one of the tastiest beans. And we'd like to just boil them and have them with our dinners. They're just so easy to cook and just super easy to grow. You do want to be careful not to yank the bean from the vine. So I just hold the vine in one hand and pull it with my other hand at the stem. It comes right off. Now to harvest bush beans, you want to look for beans that are not overly thick and too tough. Now here I've got some Vermont cranberry beans growing, and unfortunately we've had a lot of rain, so I've gotten a little bit of powdery mildew. But you can see here, the pods here are just starting to bulge. So you want to catch them before that happens. Or for beans that are more of a rounder type of pod, you want to harvest them when they're about pencil thickness. Once they get bigger than that, the pods tend to get really tough and they're not much good for eating. Here's one that's just about right. So grab it, snap it off. You've got some nice beans for dinner. So the more that you harvest beans, the more they're going to produce. So get out in your garden, check them every day, lift up your beans because they love to hide underneath, and make sure that you're harvesting regularly. That's really the key to tons of beans this summer. If this concept of non-stop bean harvesting is new to you, let me know. I look forward to reading your comments. Thanks for watching. See you next time in the garden.